Okay, let's dive right into this. Today, we're unpacking a workplace drama that honestly happens way more often than anyone wants to admit. We're talking about a brilliantly complex framework that was blatantly stolen, and how one tiny, almost invisible digital footprint completely unraveled an incredibly toxic corporate cover up. It's a story about recognition, erasure, and how a seemingly boring file system actually saved the day. So buckle up, because the way everyday office documents can totally betray the people who try to manipulate them, it's going to surprise you. Maya Carter, the head of strategy in our case study today, she hit the nail right on the head with this. The dangerous documents never look dangerous first, and that is so true, isn't it? The most brazen workplace thefts, they don't start with some massive screaming match in a boardroom. Nope, they start quietly, with a totally normal-looking file, maybe a tiny tweak in the document properties, or just a rewritten title. It happens so silently that the person being robbed usually doesn't even realize it until the whole thing is finalized and presented. Part 1. The Stolen Draft. This whole thing kicks off with an employee named Sofia Lane. Now, Sofia wasn't the loudest person in the room, but she was an absolute powerhouse when it came to building foundational structures. The trouble starts when a really unique decision framework, one that Sofia had painstakingly designed months prior, suddenly shows up front and center in a brand new presentation from a totally different department. It was just a simple proposal page, but it carried Sofia's entire thought process, her logic, her exact structural flow. But her name? Completely gone. Stripped out. This is exactly how idea theft begins, through a boring, administrative-looking document where the people in power are just banking on the fact that nobody's going to bother checking the fine print. But, well, they were wrong. Maya Carter recognized that familiar design pattern immediately. Part 2. Erasing the true author. And this is where the corporate cover-up machine kicks into high gear. When confronted about it, department head Claire Ben used the most perfectly polished corporate speak to basically shrink Sofia's role down to nothing. It wasn't a flat-out denial, it was one of those sugar-coated demotions. Claire's excuse was incredibly smooth. She said, "Oh, Sofia only handled the formatting. She didn't have a real role in the final proposal." Sounds totally reasonable on the surface, right? They call it refining or teamwork. But the cold, hard reality was that Sofia had designed the entire core intellectual structure months earlier. Claire's polite little excuse completely erased the deep intellectual heavy lifting Sofia actually did. You can imagine the tension in the room. It was palpable. Elise, an independent board member, shut down that corporate doublespeak with one incredibly sharp line. Progress is not a slide title. The audit team basically refused to swallow this glossy corporate language that was actively erasing the true creator. They were done listening to polite excuses. Instead, they decided to follow the digital paper trail. Part 3. Tracing the digital footprint. Because here is the thing. When people lie, the system tells the truth. We're entering the digital forensics phase now. Instead of getting into an argument, Maya and her team treated this file like a literal digital crime scene. They knew every single click leaves a trace. So Maya builds this incredibly methodical visual proof map. What's the object? Who was the original owner? What exactly does the timestamp say? Who skipped the approval process? And ultimately, which employee is getting screwed over here? On their own, these data points seem pretty boring, but stitch them together, they map out the exact trajectory of a theft. Nina, an executive assistant, backed this up beautifully. She proved a fundamental workplace truth. Invisible background work always leaves highly visible records. We're talking calendar exports, auto-saved drafts, email forwarding trails. The people who look down on administrative work usually forget that those invisible systems, they see absolutely everything. Putting it all together, IT specialist Jordan pulls a raw system export. No flashy graphics here, just the cold, hard truth of the machine. The timeline was undeniable. T-1, Sofia creates the file. T-2, the access path is suddenly narrowed. T-3, the owner field is manually changed by Claire. That raw metadata completely crushed Claire's fabricated story. Machines, after all, don't have any motive to lie. And right at that moment, analyst Aisha asks a question that literally forces the whole room into silence. Who benefits if this stays classified as harmless? Office lies only survive when the damage is minimized or ignored. But the second Aisha asked that, the underlying motives became crystal clear. Everyone's eyes went straight to the people who were gaining power by erasing Sofia's name. Part 4. The ineradicable signature. This is the major turning point. This is where cold digital evidence meets human realization at the executive level.
During the review, the interim CEO suddenly puts two and two together. The flawless decision framework inside Claire's proposal, it matched, down to the finest detail, a structure Sofia had submitted to the company's archive way earlier. The CEO didn't even need to look at the metadata anymore. Sofia's unique intellectual structure spoke for itself. Her true signature was the way she organized chaos into order. Driving that point home, Maya drops his absolute mic drop of a statement. I am not asking you to trust me. I am asking you to trust the record you created. It's such a brilliant argument because it totally removes the emotion from the room. The evidence is undeniable because it's built from the company's own unalterable server logs. You just can't argue with a server.
Part 5. Systemic protection. The thief was caught, but now what?
Maya flat out refused a quiet, behind-closed-doors apology. She knew that keeping it private just gives a green light for it to happen again. If you only do a quiet apology email, the system that allowed the theft stays completely intact. Future employees are still at risk. But a public correction? That doesn't just restore Sofia's credit. It cements her name into the public record as an undeniable, documented fact. So Maya's team implemented real structural changes to protect everyone. First, they corrected the public record right where the damage happened. Second, and I absolutely love this, they created a signature pattern appendix for all major proposals. And third, they mandated that the core intellectual structure had to be explicitly credited, not just the person presenting the slides. This wasn't about revenge. This was about architecture. They built a system that made stealing credit incredibly difficult going forward. As we wrap up this analysis, I really want you to think about this core idea. Some signatures are not ink. They are the way a person thinks, solves, and leaves order behind. When you work, you aren't just producing documents. You're leaving behind a methodology, your own professional DNA. The truth doesn't always come out in some big dramatic speech. Sometimes it just waits patiently inside a timestamp or a document history log until someone is smart enough to actually read it. So, what's the big takeaway from Sofia's story? Never, ever underestimate the power of those tiny server records. Before we go, I want to leave you with this question. What do the digital footprints in your office say about who is really doing the work? Are the system logs telling the true story of your contributions, or is someone else quietly changing the owner field? Think about it.